Hi, Nutrition 111 students. Today we are going to look at Chapter 7, which is a very important chapter on energy balance and weight control. We know that there is an obesity epidemic. Clearly, Americans are getting larger. Not only the current statistics, but the trends are worrisome. And the problem here is a health one. At a certain body weight, risks for many conditions and chronic diseases increase. And this impairs the quality of life of individuals of all ages, increases healthcare costs, and on and on and on. Now, what we also know is that despite most Americans being overweight and obese, people still are having to deal with what is called weight bias. Weight bias, of course, are the negative stereotypes, judgments, discrimination that overweight people have to deal with, are subjected to. You'll finish a discussion on this for this unit, and I think it's very important because healthcare professionals are sometimes the individuals who are guilty of this. So as we talk about weight and overweight, we need to be very aware not to contribute to weight bias. It's about health. We want individuals to be healthier, and we want to create strategies that increase their chances of being healthier, and we want to communicate and relate to them in respectful ways. Because the fact of the matter is, the answer to this question is not simple. It's both yes and no. Of course, energy balance is at the root of this. So we have a couple of slides here. This individual, he consumes 3,000 calories and he expends the same. Now we'll see, he's not expending all 3,000 in physical activity. Most of it is his metabolic rate, but nonetheless, he expends the same as he consumes, and therefore his weight stays the same. This individual is consuming more than she expends, and therefore her weight increases. Now they have her as being asleep in a chair here, but again, it's not just about physical activity, and that's very important. We could have an active individual, exercising 2 hours a day, but if that individual consumes more calories than they expend in exercise, physical activity, and also metabolic rate and thermic effect of food, they will still gain weight. And in this case, we have an individual who is expending more than consuming and therefore decreases weight. Again, I'm taking a little bit of issue with the physical activity as if it's the only expender of calories, but we'll get to that. Now, how is this not simple? I alluded to that already, but let's start at the consumption side. There are a lot of factors that influence what and how much we eat, and some of them we control and some of them we have less control over. And this differs from person to person according to their situation. Okay, so it's a kind of a no judgment zone here. Hunger is a physiological need to eat, but appetite is a psychological desire to eat. Both can trigger food consumption. Satiety is a feeling of fullness or no longer being hungry, and that should be the cue to stopping eating. The environment is a powerful influence, and so are psychological factors. I want to take just a minute to look at this hunger scale. I've used this a lot in classes with children, actually. So 5 is not hungry, not full, completely neutral. And what this says is that you should start eating not at a 1 when you're shaking and famished, but at 3, okay? When you're starting to get those cues. And you probably know why. This is because if you wait too long, then you will not have any sense of control. You'll probably overconsume and maybe unhealthy foods as well. But look at the top here. All right, so we go from 5 to 10, which is stuffed and uncomfortable. We're supposed to stop eating at a 7. That's that satiety signal when you're no longer hungry. Sometimes I say lightly full, and yet many of us eat well past that. It's been said by experts that if we attended to our cues, if we started eating when we were just hungry and stopped when we were just barely full, then we wouldn't have the problems with our energy balance in this country. Now, something that gets in the way of the cue for hunger, or paying only attention to hunger, is of course our food environment, which has been described as an obesogenic environment, which means food is everywhere. And there's something about the food too. Large portions created to be irresistible. But access is also important. We see food everywhere, from vending machines to food at the counters, at checkouts, in all sorts of stores. It surrounds us. Now, I talked about availability. I talked about a little bit portion size, but we've discussed that already. I want to talk about how the food is engineered, or actually, let Michael Moss do this.
We're here for the real food enthusiasts who want to stir up something new and unbox kitchen creativity. Get a healthy mix of fresh fruits, vegetables, and pantry staples delivered to your door.
Taco Bell's Doritos Locos Tacos, just released in its 3rd iteration, is a marriage made in processed food heaven. It joins a perfectly engineered snack with a proven fast food colossus. This is Michael Moss, and I write about the intersection of food and marketing for the New York Times. And so I've been asked, what's in it? There are the ingredients, of course, but its real powers lie in what food scientists call psychobiology. That's the study of how the brain reacts to stimuli. The reason that Doritos Locos Tacos have been so successful, says food scientist Stephen Witherly, is because they are engineered to target taste buds using the most powerful features known to manufacturers. It has dynamic contrast. That's the pleasant sensation of biting through the crispy shell to the fat-laced filling. Taco Bell offers lower fat options, but the Doritos versions hit the mark for maximum allure. Half its calories come from fat, which gives it that craveable quality called mouthfeel. It has acids, lactic and citric, which get the saliva flowing and excite the brain's pleasure center. In turn, the brain says, "Go ahead, eat more." It has a long hang time flavor system in which the lingering smell stimulates food memories and cravings, and yet, this is the strangest one of all, it's forgettable. None of the many flavors in Doritos Locos Tacos are strong enough to trip a signal called sensory-specific satiety that will cause you to feel like you've had enough. That's the point. They are designed to make you want more. That means more profits and more opportunity to live up to the translation of the Doritos name, little bits of gold.
So yes, there's something about the food. This ultra-processed food has been designed to be our worst enemy, actually, but certainly to make good money for the food corporations. Nature does not design foods this way. Psychological factors are important as well. Food for all of us is more than nutrients, right? It is community, it is pleasure, it is a comfort. But in some cases, responding to food as a Band-Aid can get us into trouble with our energy imbalance, especially when this happens a lot. So some people need to learn how to kind of unlink the emotional pain from the reaction to reach for food. And it can require a counselor. Those things can be quite tough. Over the course of the pandemic, early on, we were very excited about people cooking more, and it seemed like nutrition was actually improving, one of the few positives of the pandemic. But then as the pandemic wore on and we became more and more worn down, we saw people gaining weight. And some of that was probably due to these factors. Okay, so that's the inside of energy and some of the factors that make it complex. But I also want to make this point perfectly clear. Whether you gain, lose, or maintain your weight has to do with the relationship between what you consume and what you expend in terms of calories. It's not just about what you consume. It's the balance between the two. So we consume kcals in food and drink, okay, for those different reasons, but we expend kcals in these areas. Most of us, the biggest portion by far is our metabolic rate. And you can see factors that increase the BMR and decrease. Take a read over those because those can make a big difference. If someone starts a fitness regimen and becomes more lean, that will increase their BMR. Someone with excess thyroid hormones, people who are born tall and thin have a greater body surface area, which increases their BMR. Periods of growth as well. Factors that decrease as we get older, not having enough thyroid hormone production, being shorter, and lowering your calorie intake to very low levels. So some people drop their kcals way down in an effort to lose weight and then find that they have a tougher time, or they seem to be, it has an effect that they can't imagine because they're not losing weight. I've worked with clients where I've had to increase their calories in order for them to start losing weight again. Physical activity, a smaller portion for most of us, and a thermic effect of food, which is a relative constant. It's the calories that are used to digest and absorb and metabolize food. A little different depending on the type of nutrient. Now, there is an equation which you won't have to calculate on the exam, but it's helpful if you want to estimate your energy needs. What you do need to understand is what factors go into this equation, because they have an impact on either your metabolic rate or the calories that you burn with exercise. So you can see here, it's your age, your physical activity, your weight, and your height, and then also whether male or female. That's important as well. Men tend to have a higher metabolic rate than females. And these are the physical activity estimates that go into that equation. These are categories that we use quite a bit: sedentary, low activity, active, or very active. Okay, a couple of other things that are covered in your text, but I want to make sure to emphasize a few of them. Know what set point is. So here's what happens biologically and physiologically. When people gain weight, their body tends to defend that weight. And this comes from centuries and centuries and centuries of excess body fat being something that was positive for a human being. Okay, for most of the period when humans existed, having stores of body fat was a survival advantage. So our bodies are still holding on to that. We want the fat, even though now, surrounded by food in this obesogenic environment, we can easily overconsume, and we have the problem with chronic diseases. So our body tends to resist weight change through a number of different mechanisms that you'll see on these slides. One of them is ghrelin. I will click into this. Ghrelin is a hormone that is produced by your stomach that increases your appetite. It increases before meals for all of us. But for people who are trying to lose weight or are losing weight, what will happen is ghrelin will increase further. And what we now know is, and this is an excellent article, feelings of hunger after weight loss may never go away. Okay, so people who are overweight or obese and then lose weight really have a struggle for many, many years. Much of this because of the hunger hormone ghrelin. Your body's not happy and is trying to get you to regain that weight. We also have leptin, which is actually a hormone that works to our advantage. If we gain some fat, then leptin is secreted, and this actually decreases our appetite and increases energy expenditure. What we see with overweight or obese individuals is that it seems that the leptin is not functioning correctly. Other factors are related to metabolic rate, in that some of us are just born with a thrifty metabolism. We seem to use every single calorie, and so it becomes more difficult for us to manage weight. And there are also factors like adaptive thermogenesis and feudal cycling that help individuals hold on to weight as well. Brown adipose tissue is something that you look at. And this is very interesting. It wasn't covered in your textbook, but it is covered was covered in the last textbook we used for this course. What they're supposing is that some individuals, when they start their exercise regimen, that's their physical activity, they actually then compensate with less in the category of NEAT, which is non-exercise activities, things like fidgeting, running up and down the stairs. So in other words, let's say you have a client and you tell that client to, take an hour-long walk, run 3 times a week. And they go out and do that. But then when they come home, instead of the normal routine of maybe chasing the kids around, taking the dog for a walk, or cleaning up around the apartment, they collapse on the couch. So even though they've expended more calories in exercise, they end up compensating with less in the NEAT category, in the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Kind of interesting. These are factors that you should look over in this chart. So you can see here, it's complicated, right? Lots of different things influence how we use calories and whether we store fat. Satiety, we talked about consuming more fructose, and that gets in the way of satiety signals. All right, so let's talk about, well, what do we do? And before that, how do we assess overweight? The standard is the BMI, okay? And the BMI is just a math equation that uses weight and height, but it's far from perfect. It is not meant to be the only factor that determines whether someone is assessed at having a weight that is a health issue. And this image shows you one of the reasons for that. Both of these men would be classified as being obese with a BMI of 33. And obviously, they have very different health profiles. Okay, so we would imagine that the gentleman on the right would be at a much higher risk for obesity related disorders. So BMI is kind of artificially increased, or it's increased in people who are very muscular or have a very dense skeleton. 2 things that are positive health-wise, but can kick up your BMI. We also know that across different ethnicities, BMI is different. Okay, so some ethnicities have more muscle and more bone mass, others have less. So using the same standard really is not accurate. And yet, it's what we have, it's easy to calculate, and we use it quite a bit. Better would be to estimate body composition, but unfortunately, this isn't as simple to calculate. The little simple kind of gadgets used to calculate body composition aren't overly accurate. The best way to have it done is with a caliper and a very practiced person who is using that caliper, or something like underwater weighing, and that is not readily available. Another easy way to look at weight and health risk is through waist circumference. What we know is that people who store more body fat centrally, okay, in the abdominal area, have a higher risk for obesity-related diseases like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And those who store body fat in a lower body regions are less likely to have those. So not only your weight, not only your BMI, but how you store your body fat is also a predictor of health risks. All of this to say, this needs to be individualized. If you're working with a professional, whether that's a nurse, a primary care provider, or a dietitian, they should be doing more than calculating your BMI and giving you a copy of a diet. Okay, this all needs to be personalized, because we need to look at the factors that influence that individual's health and weight before we make recommendations. All right, and what could those recommendations be? Certainly there are medications out there, but all of them come with side effects, and the prescription drugs must be followed by a physician. Okay, the amount of weight that is lost is not insignificant, but is not as exciting as I think some individuals believe. And yet these medications do have side effects. So our patients who are taking them to assist with weight loss need to be followed carefully and closely. Surgery is another option, and it is highly effective in terms of weight loss. There are even more types of surgeries and procedures profiled in your textbook, so take a look at that. What I would say about bariatric surgeries is they work. They do come with some risks. They're relatively minimal, but unfortunately, the risk of death or morbidity is not 0%. So some people run into problems. But I think something that is a bigger issue, a more common issue, is the false belief that once I have the surgery, I'm just like the other guy or girl. You know, I can just live a normal life and not think about my weight. And that isn't true. These individuals, especially with the major surgery like the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, not only need to take supplements to make up for the nutrients they are malabsorbing, but they also need to pay close attention to their diet and their physical activity and their wellness too. So it is a lifelong journey for sure. Now, besides medications and surgery, of course, there are diets. And I hate to use the word diet. I should say weight loss programs. A good weight loss program should be more than just about controlling your calorie intake. It should be about increasing your physical activity and attending to your behaviors as well. All of this is important in this triad. So your textbook does a great job of going through lots of different things that are related to weight loss. And I'm just going to touch upon a few of them. You actually do this in your homework this unit. So it's the importance of just trimming some calories off of whatever you're presently eating, and that can make a difference. Controlling hunger is important. It's hard to stick with, good intentions when you're hungry. So it is important to be hungry before meal times, but you don't want to be hungry constantly. So drinking water, eating high fiber snacks and more protein, bulkier foods, and eating more slowly is important as well. The weight loss plateau can be very, very frustrating for individuals. People who are trying to lose weight should know that it's probably going to happen because weight, unfortunately, just doesn't fall off at a constant rate. At the beginning of a change in your lifestyle, you can lose a lot of weight because of the fluid and fat, but then it slows. And sometimes people get frustrated with the pace of this and they may consume more calories. So you need to start tracking perhaps and get back to what your plan is. And also, one idea to kind of kick up your metabolism and then get off this plateau is to increase physical activity. Regular physical activity is really important. It's important for our health, right? Not just for weight loss. But as we change our body composition to less fat, more lean, we'll be burning more calories all the way through. So that's important. And you can't discount all of the positives that come from physical activity that just help us feel better. And this is very important during a period when we're changing our lifestyle. I wanted to mention mindful and mindless eating. Mindful eating is being very aware of everything around food, from preparation to consumption. And I would take one step back, even the shopping for food. It's slowing down, it's tasting, it's listening to your body cues. It's paying attention to those cues as well. Another trick of the trade is understanding triggers that trigger food consumption, and then kind of taking a minute to ask questions when that happens. So I feel like I need some candy. And then you run through these questions. And then the next step is to substitute another behavior for eating. I wanted to, your text is the first I've heard of this mindless eating, because you would think, well, that would be a bad thing. But I do understand what they're describing here. Mindless eating is essentially altering your environment. So without even thinking, you'll do the healthier thing, okay? So this might be putting really high calorie chocolate cake that was left over from a special dinner into the freezer, or giving it away. This would be putting veggies into little ready to grab snack bags so you can reach in the refrigerator and get them, having fruit out on your counter, putting the cereals and the snacks away, using smaller plates. All of these things have a default of the healthier behavior without even thinking. So that's that mindless eating. Now, we're closing up here, but I wanted to make some suggestions for weight gain, because some individuals are underweight and need to increase weight. We still want them to consume healthy foods, so energy dense, but nutrient dense too. So I'm going to actually change this slide to say nutrient dense, energy dense food. So these are foods that would be nuts or trail mixes, or maybe low fat flavored milks, a little bit higher in calories, more frequent meals and snacks. And as far as physical activity, some strength training to build mass. The routine should be tilted more into the strength training and less on the aerobic exercise, which is burning fat. Before all of this, however, you should assess the individual and make sure there's not a physical cause for their low body weight. And as far as gaining weight as muscle, not fat, I've been asked that a lot by athletes or just individuals who want to bulk up. We do talk about a serving of high quality protein before and after strength training, and that's to optimize muscle building. We also talk about carbohydrate with that protein to increase protein absorption and also to give you the full fuel you need for the workouts. And then pretty much a balanced dietary pattern that we would recommend for everyone. Remember that someone who is working very hard at resistance work or strength training does need more protein than the average person, up to somewhere around double. 0.8 for the average person, grams per kilogram, up to 1.6. I've even seen 2 grams per kilogram for someone who is doing a lot of muscle work. Okay, thank you.